Okay, I really hate it when Resident Evil's mechanics bleed into other genres that aren't survival horror. What I mean by this are times when saving your game can actually be screwing you over. I mean, there was Tomb Raider, where if you use a save crystal too early, or when you're low on health, it would make the next section longer and more difficult. Then there's Ninja Gaiden Black, where if you save and then use too many health potions, the next boss fight can be 5 times harder than it would be normally. Then there's Mega Man Zero. Wait, survival horror mechanics in a Mega Man game? Why yes, actually. If you die 3 times, it's game over. Like in any other Mega Man game, except you can't continue and try the stage again. Instead, you have to reload a save. So if you die in a boss 2 times and then beat him, you'll have to go back to the mission selection and save with 0 lives left. Then you'll have no lives to go through the next stage with, so you have to do it perfect. This becomes a huge annoyance, so I just hoarded lives so I would never have to worry about it. There's one level where you can just get 2 lives in the same life, so you can just do this a bunch of times over and over again, die, repeat, slowly gain lives that you can actually use to play the game. Except then you get a terrible score for the level. Yes, in addition to the game being really hard from it being just Mega Man, you also are graded at the end of each level, and unless you're a master, you're not going to do so well. But instead of it being a grade for each individual level you complete, your grade is based on an average of all the levels you've completed. I could never figure out the point of the grading system anyway. It didn't seem to have any effect on the gameplay, yet it displays your current grade all the time while you're playing, right under your health. Why does that need to be there if you don't even know what it's affecting? I know in later games if you do well or you get rewarded with weapons and upgrades, but I don't understand that either. You need to be a master of the Mega Man Zero games to get those upgrades because, again, it's an average rather than an individual level score. Thus, having a chance great run of a level doesn't mean anything. Inevitably, if you're having trouble with the game, you're not going to get a good score. So why give the weapons to the players that definitely do not need the weapons? Why give the really good player the powerful weapons when the player is already so good at the game that they can get through the whole level without getting hit quickly? Anyway, the other reason that saving your game can screw you over is with the Cyber Elves. They're basically usable items that you pick up in levels, but there's a limited amount of them. Thus, if you use too many of them, you won't have enough for the final stage and the final boss, and the game will be much harder because of it. So there are 3 types of Cyber Elves, but the only ones that are even ever useful are the ones that restore or increase your health. So 2/3 of the Cyber Elves are worthless, especially since you can only carry 3 elves, plus the game punishes you for using them by lowering your score, but it's not like that matters. The rest of the game is a mess too, so sometimes after you kill a boss, you'll get an elemental weapon chip, but it seems arbitrary which boss gives you which one, as opposed to the other Mega Man games where you kill a boss and you get its weapon, and you always get its weapon, and there's 8 weapons, but anyway, eventually I realized that these acted like the weapons in the other Mega Man games because each boss has a weakness, but there's only 3 weapon chips, fire, ice, and electric, which is lame compared to the 8 weapons in other Mega Man games, plus there's no creativity in that, and they're the same throughout all the Zero games. So, but then the weaknesses are strange too. I mean, fire beats ice, ice beats electric, and electric beats fire. I mean, Pokemon has some weird weaknesses, but I don't think anything as strange as that. The game takes place on a map. That is a 2D, world, in a sense. It's sort of like Metroid, but it doesn't play like that. You can leave the base going off in other directions, and then you end up in other levels. But there's no reason to ever go exploring on this map, because maybe if you want to grab a few items in the levels, instead of you exploring the map to do missions, you just talk to someone and she sends you to a level to play through, and then the game proceeds like any other Mega Man game. The persistent world aspect of the game does not need to exist. Plus, it gives the game designers an excuse to reuse levels, which they do actually do multiple times. And then there's this weird mission structure. You can actually fail missions, and then they'll be gone forever. And so I guess this allows for different mission paths to be taken, so there's more than one way to play through the game, but it just ends up being really confusing. The sequels went on to fix some of these things, but create problems of their own. Luckily, the mission structure of the first stage is completely banned in all the sequels for a more standard stage select screen. Mega Man Zero 2 also gives you continues when you lost all your lives, fixing another problem. It's added a new weapon, though, a grappling hook. which is used to cross gaps. It's just kind of a stupid gimmick, and it's annoying to use in Control, plus in order to use it, you have to go to the menu and switch one of your 2 weapons to it. Mega Man Zero 2 plays like the first game, except with a lot of problems of the game fixed, so it's really not that bad, and probably the best of the franchise. So, of course, Mega Man Zero 3 had to break everything again. Just when you were getting used to the elf system, it decided to change it. Now you have access to all your elves at once, but there are less of them, and you have to level them up before using them to make them stronger. So I screwed that up and used the elf to increase your health without upgrading it, thinking that there'd be more of those types of elves, but then there weren't. So I only got 4 health increase to bring my max health up to 20 when it could have been more than that. But the game neglected to tell you this. But then I randomly stumbled across a sub-tank in one of the levels, and it is the most broken item ever. I don't think these were in the previous Mega Man Zero games, but it is in Zero 4 as well. So the sub-tank, it stores 32 health, which is double your starting health of 16. It makes most of the game a cakewalk, so I never had to use any health restoring elves until the final boss. But the problem with it is that it's just arbitrarily hidden one of the levels. It was just by chance that I stumbled across it. Another player of similar skill level, just as me, wouldn't have known about it, and they wouldn't have accidentally found it, and the game would have been much harder for them. So, of course, with such a broken item, they had to just keep it in the next game. There are 4 sub-tanks in Mega Man Zero 4, but 2 of them are gotten by getting S ranks on the levels, which you'll remember is impossible to do. So, if you're having trouble with the game as it is, which is why you need the sub-tanks in the first place, you're going to have to go for one of the 2 that aren't gotten through S ranks. So, now you'd think that having just 1 sub-tank would be more than enough, but not for this game. They changed the elf system again, of course. Now the elves are a persistent upgrade, so they're no longer usable items. So you can't just hoard them all game and only use them on the final stage this time. So this makes the final boss of Mega Man Zero 4 frustratingly hard. By just naturally playing the game, you're only going to come across 1 sub-tank, or none, because the other sub-tank is cryptically hidden. But since you can't use elves as health resources anymore, that's not going to be enough to fight that final boss. Plus, once you use the sub-tank once, you can't use it again even if you die in the boss, meaning in order to give the boss another reasonable attempt, you need to redo the entire stage again to refill your sub-tank. But the final stage is long, like in every Mega Man Zero game. You have to fight all the other 8 bosses all in a row, like in the other Mega Man games, and that takes forever. Plus, this time, fighting the bosses all in a row doesn't even show what it's meant to show. See, usually the purpose of the boss rush in the Mega Man games is to show how much you've grown. Before, those bosses were only the boss of the level, and they were difficult. You really had to learn their patterns and get your movement and shooting perfect. But when you get to the boss rush, you're supposed to go through all 8 of the bosses easily in order to show that you've really grown and you're much more powerful. This is the result of not only having their patterns already memorized, but also having all their weapon weaknesses. In the other Mega Man Zero games, you would have their weaknesses, so this part of the game wasn't really mentionable. But in Mega Man Zero 4, if you screwed up like I did, you won't have all their weaknesses, so you won't feel empowered during this section at all, defeating its purpose. You see, Zero 4 decided to add a weather system to the game. There's hard weather and then there's easy weather. So sometimes wind will make it harder for you to jump across platforms or whatever. Silly me, I thought all the weather did was give you bonus points for completing the level with it, which it does, but it also actually gives you a bunch of different abilities. Also, in those abilities were elemental attacks, which you now suddenly never get in this game except from completing the hard weather stages. So whatever you do, make sure you always do the hard weather. It usually isn't even all that harder, and you can't just go back and do the stage again with the hard weather to get the elemental attacks. Believe me, I've tried. It sucks how you can totally screw yourself over like this, and that's why I think Mega Man Zero 4 is the worst of all. So, that's the entire Mega Man Zero series in a nutshell. It's Mega Man with awful survival horror mechanics, terrible confusing systems like cyber elves, You'll notice I didn't really talk much about the level design or bosses or anything like that, and that's just because it's standard Mega Man. But this Mega Man is encased in the most frustrating of packages, and so the Mega Man Zero games suck. Oh, and also the story is overcomplicated, stupid, and boring, but who cares?